Hi there, and welcome to the Sheroes Collective Podcast. This is Series 2, Women in Media. And I'm your host, Renee Sparks, a public health professional with a foundation in nursing based in Cape Town, South Africa. Today's Shero is the absolutely phenomenal Pontsho Pilane. She's the Communications and Advocacy Manager at Soul City Institute for Social Justice. She's an award-winning journalist, author, as well as a media lecturer. Her interests are in health, gender, race, human rights, and how they all intersect. She holds 3 degrees in media studies and journalism, and this phenomenal Shero has started the hashtag Free to Bleed campaign in 2015, which led to the scrapping of the value-added tax on sanitary towels in South Africa, which is huge, right? And lastly, but not least, she's won the Vodacom Journalism Award for Young Journalist of the Year in 2016, as well as the Discovery Health Journalist of the Year Award in 2018. Now, on that note, welcome, Pontsho. And please let me know if I didn't capture all of your dynamic self in that intro. This is your moment.
No, thank you so much, Renee. It's such a pleasure and honor to be on your podcast. I think you are as much a Shero as I am. And I think maybe perhaps the last thing that's not there is that I'm doing my PhD at university, and I'm studying the ways in which obesity research stigmatizes and can be harmful towards Black women in South Africa.
Oh, that's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm very glad that I've opened that up. So without any further ado, this is a conversation, but when researching you, and I do know you, but I still had to go and research all these little bits about you. I noted that when you were 18, you actually started chemical engineering. That was your pathway. So how did you go from chemical engineering to journalism? How did that happen?
So I'm from a mining town. I'm from a small village called Muruleng that's in the northwest in Rustenburg, which is the platinum belt. And the only way that as a young person and as an impressionable teenager, I saw success was when people worked in the mines who became engineers. You know, the only success that I was surrounded by was through engineering. And my sister is actually married to a metallurgical engineer. So it made it even more kind of brought it back home. And so I started chemical engineering because I was smart enough to, and that was the only way I knew success until I came to WITS and was exposed to more careers. I started discovering other passions that I have, my activism, my writing, and, realizing that I actually have more than one talent, and my passion does not necessarily lie in engineering. And yeah, I took the bullet to pursue other things.
Amazing. So tell me, did you finish the chemical engineering, or did you kind of were you swayed?
I was swayed in between the studies. I was doing my second year when I completely changed. 2 years felt like a lifetime, Sometimes I do regret. I think I should have just finished the degree and maybe stayed to do an honors degree in a BA related subject, but it is what it is. I don't regret it as much. Yeah, I think my life would have turned out incredibly differently had I pursued it for much longer.
No, absolutely. I think we would have been deprived of this. So I mean, really, the work you do is incredible. So we're very happy that you've come this way. That leads me to the next thing. So I mean, you just spoke about your skill set and just how diverse it is, right? I mean, when I heard about journalism in the first place, I would always just think about either the news or a newspaper. But I mean, you've kind of shown that there's this entire toolkit. You could be doing podcasts, you could be on radio, you could be like you've written a book. So there are many, many different things that you could use within that toolkit. How do you think about using which strategy? How do you kind of figure out this is the strategy I'm taking for this particular campaign, or this is the direction I'm going to go, whether it's an op-ed or an article or anything like that? How do you go about selecting your tool?
Yeah, I think it depends on opportunity more than anything else, you know. So when I first became a journalist, I was a journalist who completely only worked online. And then the opportunity to work at the Mail and Guardian came through, which was a newspaper, and through that other opportunities. So it's leveraging different opportunities at different times, but also considering what the audience that I'm trying to speak to, where they are. If I'm trying to speak to policymakers, newspaper, a more traditional media platform is the way to go. But, you know, you have to think quite dynamically about if you're trying to reach a wider audience in rural areas, radio is perhaps the most suitable medium. And so for me, it's always where the need, but also where the opportunity presents itself to try different media out and to use it to amplify different voices and different causes.
Okay, that's fantastic that you're ending on that note, because I was going to ask, how do you intentionally seek to create these platforms so that we can hear the voices from the ground? I mean, very often it's quite difficult, right? When you have won awards, when you are seen in the public eye, to not kind of just be channeling your own agenda. You obviously, any advocate, there's a reason why we're in this space. There are actually other voices or other concerns. So there's inequities that you've seen, there's injustices that you've seen, and you're trying to kind of raise that. So how do you make sure that you always or constantly bringing those voices and those authentic voices to the fore?
That's such a great question, and such a deep question as well. I love it. You know, I think when I was in my early 20s, I discovered Arundhati Roy, who's an Indian author and activist. And I discovered her through one of her most famous quotations, which is, there's no such thing as the voiceless. They are only the deliberately silenced or preferably unheard. And that, for me, kind of summarizes what amplification is, that you're not giving a voice to the voiceless. We're just giving an ear. We are deliberately listening and hearing those who are speaking that we have just chosen not to listen to for whatever reason. And we are deliberately not silencing their voices, and we are preferring to hear them out. And so that's what amplifying voices is. It's listening to the story of each and every person, particularly, I would say, Black women, whose voices are misconstrued all the time. And as a Black woman myself, you know, looking within myself at which voices in me have been silenced or have been deliberately ignored. It's been able to take my own experiences and amplify my own thoughts and my own experiences and my own lived experiences that has enabled me to be able to see other people's stories and lives and experiences in the same way.
Oh, wow, that is powerful. I totally agree, because you as you're speaking, I'm remembering now, I wrote an article about my stillbirth that I'd experienced. And at first I was like, is this something I want to share with people? And eventually, you know, when you meet various women that have gone through the same type of loss, you realize I'm using my own story. And in some or other way, it's helping them to heal, it's helping them to even now have conversations in different spaces. So, wow, that is really powerful. As you're speaking, I'm thinking about, and I'm sure others who will listen to this podcast is also going to be like reflecting on things that they've done themselves that could have, you know, kind of amplified a voice, or even their own voices, getting their own voices into the space. So that's really powerful. And I love that. Definitely agree with, there's no such person that is voiceless. So yeah, awesome. Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I was just going to say, you know, I think the most compelling stories that we can tell as individuals, as a collective, is our own stories. And no matter how boring or how touchy-feely we think they might be, our own stories in our own voices, in our own perspectives will always be the most compelling and sometimes the most important stories we have to tell.
No, absolutely. I agree. Which brings me to my next thing, because we were just touching on traumas, because your own story could be traumatic when you're sharing it. So how do you deal? And I'm thinking back, maybe you don't experience it as much in your current position. I also don't know. I'm making an assumption. But when you're a journalist, you're quite exposed to a lot of things. And when I've looked at what you've reported on or what you've written about things like termination of pregnancy. I know that you've gone into spaces and acted as if you're seeking services to see what that was like. And you've also been quite instrumental when it comes to Fees Must Fall and fallism. So, I mean, those are really quite triggering and traumatic. So how exactly would you deal with some of that trauma?
Yeah, it is, I mean, I think back to, I was such a baby during Fees Must Fall. And it was such a big thing, and having to navigate that space was overwhelming to a certain degree. And yeah, even some of the health stuff, seeing people in the most vulnerable states in situations that you can only do so much, and the helplessness that it also comes in, but also putting yourself on the line. So with regards to that, it's just a matter of having a safe space, whether it's with colleagues in the newsroom, but also having a space where I can go talk about what I'm experiencing with other people who will understand in what capacity as a journalist I'm experiencing these things. And also just switching off. I think one of the hardest things that I had to do during Fees Must Fall was switch off. I think the first 10 days of Fees Must Fall, I barely slept. Because even though I was covering the protest, I was a student, a Black student who luckily was not in debt, but I understood what was on the line and what these protests were about. And sometimes having to remove oneself from these things is the self-care that's needed. But it's also a very difficult thing because as journalists, we can be incredibly passionate to our own detriment. So it's about really having firm and healthy boundaries around your personal space and your workspace, and also debriefing on the traumatic parts.
Yeah. Okay, that's great tips. I think for any activist, it's the same. Take that time and self-care. And I think we don't do it enough. So thanks for highlighting that. And then the last thing I wanted to tap in on is, do you have any tips for people who are thinking about pursuing a career in journalism, media, or comms?
It's so funny. Because I didn't really study, like I hold degrees in media, but I didn't set out to be a journalist. I became an accidental journalist. But I would say, particularly to people who are younger, is start doing it when you're in university. When I was a chemical engineering student, I wrote a newsletter for other chemical engineering students. And I was on this 1-year program where it's called Exposure Year. And to wrap up the year, I put together a newsletter for it. Little did I know that I was slowly but surely adding up to what would become my life's work. So start wherever you are, whether it's a blog. I recently joined TikTok this week, and I'm so proud that one of my it's not going viral, but it's doing the rounds. It has a few comments. It has 1,000 views. Just do it scared. Do the thing. Put in the practice, even in the small spaces where you think no one's looking, you think no one cares about what you're doing. a lot of people don't know the backstory to how I became a leading journalist in Fees Must Fall, is that I hosted an online show on Google Hangouts. I don't even know if people know what Google Hangouts is. And sometimes the only people who would be watching would be my boss and my colleagues, like 5 people. But in that show and in the coverage of those issues, we would be interviewing VCs and students on their perspectives on university life, funding. At the Daily Vox, we were covering NFSA's protests at WITS, at UCT, before they became big. And what that did is it prepared us for the moment when Fees Must Fall happened.
Yeah.
We knew where to go, who to talk to, how to talk to them. So consistency is the currency that matters, right? If you have an interest in something, you do it until it pays off. And sometimes it's not going to pay off in the beginning. And so it's just to keep doing it even when no one's noticing. I think for me, it's the greatest deal. And obviously study journalism. But I think even if you haven't studied journalism, if you have a knack for writing and you're creative enough, you can still practice.
I hear you. Thank you so much for that. I was just going to tell you. So the inside thing with me, my father used to call me a journalist. For many, many years, he used to be, you missed your calling in life. You should have been a journalist. So when I started writing opinion pieces through Aspen, it was like, oh my word, I'm being published. I'm a journalist. That type of. So I agree with you. And you never know just how these different parts come together. I mean, if you're doing a podcast, you're on the radio, you've done this, there are so many synergies, and using your social capital or social network is as important in this. So that's absolutely awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like to be a writer, you don't have to have studied writing. And like I said, I didn't set out to be a journalist myself. I was studying I'm more of an academic media person who became a practical person. And that's because I loved writing from the time I was young. And look at you, you're still writing, you're in the media, but in the capacity and in the passion of public health and nursing. So there are different avenues to these things, and it's just about finding the path that works for you.
Exactly. Absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge, but also just your personal journey. And we look forward to see what's happening on TikTok. I'm sure it's going to blow up because that's who you are. But thank you so much, Pontsho, for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Renee. And, thank you for just to give you your flowers as well. Thank you for all the work that you do. It does not go unnoticed. I think it makes such a big difference. Our public health system, so many areas in our health system are so much better because of people like you. And it's an honor and pleasure to know you and say we started from the bottom, now we're here, to say.
I remember the first Public Health Association conference when someone said to me, there's someone in the media room looking for you, or in the, and when I walked in, it was you. I was like, this rock star is looking for me. What is going on? So yeah. So no. The feeling is mutual. Thank you so much for everything you do. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. Thank you.
Yay. Awesome.